So there's been a lot of discussion in the news recently about why higher education has gotten so expensive, and that often leads to student debt and a host of other issues. So what are the main reasons why higher education has become so prohibitively expensive?
The two most significant factors that have pushed up the cost of higher education are, one, the fact that state governments and the federal government have reduced their funding for higher education. They used to provide a great deal of support to institutions of higher education. They've stopped doing that, and those funds have to be made up for somehow, and the way they're made up for is colleges have increased tuition. So that's factor number one, is what state governments and what the federal government has done. The second major factor that's pushed up the cost of higher education is the number of administrators at colleges and universities, and that's gone up significantly, and the students have to pay for that. And so if there are now more administrators that each student has to support, then the tuition is going to have to go up for each student, so that part of that tuition goes to support those additional administrators. And the number is somewhere around an additional 20 administrators have to be supported by each student. And that's pushed up the cost close to $5,000 per student if you think of an administrator making somewhere around $100,000. So that's a lot of money right there.
So in terms of government funding, there's sort of two ways that government or public money is spent for higher education. So one is supporting the universities with funding for the institution, and one is funding students with financial aid, whether that's grants or loans from the federal government. So have those both changed in recent years, and how have those sort of played out with each other?
Both have changed and both have hurt students. Now, the grant issue really does not impact the cost of tuition. What it impacts is how much students have to pay out of their pocket for that tuition. The main factor that's pushed up tuition is that the monies that come from the that come to the state universities from the state government and from the federal government have declined. And really what's gone on since the 1980s is that state governments and the federal government have provided huge tax cuts geared to the very wealthy. And in order to balance budgets or come close to balancing budgets, something has to be cut. You can't just give tax cuts to people and then figure, okay, we don't need to worry about the consequences of this. And one of the consequences are large deficits. And one of the things that has been cut significantly is state and federal funding to institutions of higher education. And so the universities, the colleges, have seen sharp declines in aid from the government, and they've got expenses, and the expenses have to be met, and the only way they can do that is by pushing up tuition. So that's been a significant factor.